My job is to send people from Dunkirk to Britain. From April till November, the workload is very good, and the demand for Britain is high.
And business is booming.
Keir Starmer angrily answered this.
Now, the same is clearly true for the security of our borders. Illegal migration is a massive driver of global insecurity.
Declaring that illegal migration makes me angry and boasting of a historic conference to smash people-smuggling gangs, Keir Starmer walks into Lancaster House. But a dark figure named Taha silently discloses how he profits £800,000 a year ferrying vulnerable refugees across Europe.
Taha is showing me his marketplace, the areas he drums up trade. What he's selling is highly prized and illegal. A spot on a dinghy from France to the UK.
Starmer promotes slogans about ending the vile trade, but Taha dismisses the threats and says his company model is rescuing individuals. He also cautions that AK-47s and weapons are used in turf battles.
The British government says that the smugglers are killing people, but we see ourselves as rescuers and not killers. There are dangers for us too. There are quarrels between the smugglers over passengers, and this descends into fights, with someone getting wounded or killed. They use pistols, knives and AK-47s. You can't do this job without a gun.
Returning 24,000 people marks victory for Starmer. For Taha, it's just a small conflict in a market bursting with growth. The Prime Minister's speech on new intelligence initiatives and a united border calls attention to nothing save the fact that dinghies still pass regularly. Make sure to like and subscribe.
We are recruiting hundreds of specialist investigators from across our police, our border force and intelligence services, creating an elite border force, working with our international partners, ending the fragmentation. Over £150 million invested over the next 2 years. And new powers and criminal offences to get the job done.
Taha says he cannot avoid the deal. I want to give up but can't. Critics contend Starmer's promises reflect past crackdowns, while smugglers adapt and flourish. Taha's bleak confidence will probably eclipse the Prime Minister's bold pledge to abolish this underworld. Business is flourishing.
This is a death sentence, a job and a death sentence.
Yes.
Is it worth it?
No, but I can't give up on this job, because that's what I know. I want to give up, but can't stay away from this work.
What I will not have is Keir Starmer pretending that he is tough on immigration. That man opposed pretty much every single thing we tried to do to control our borders.
At Lancaster House, Keir Starmer approaches the podium ready to speak on what he describes as the first ever UK border security summit. Journalists close in, eager to hear how the Prime Minister, who has long stated he would provide both compassion and practical government, will finally address the relentless flow of small boat arrivals. Cameras flash. Critics counter that the occasion seems more like political theatre than a breakthrough from the time he starts speaking.
We're boosting enforcement with a new Border Security Command. We're giving the police more power to stop smugglers in their tracks. And we're making sure no one can profit from this vile trade. Since the election...
Though the rhetorical style is grandiose, the substance falls short. His tone is firm, but the specifics are vague. Starmer seems once more to be revealing a strategy rich in jargon and lacking in concrete, fresh ideas.
This government has returned over 20,000 people who have no right to be here, and we aren't going to stop. Returns will continue to increase. My plan for change will save lives, secure our borders, and smash the gangs for good.
This is what one reporter had to say about Starmer after hearing his speech at the summit.
Do you think that this is likely to be a fruitful gathering?
No. Look, I think this is a waste of time. Of course you should do international diplomacy, but what you really need is a deterrent. And the facts are very clear. Since Keir Starmer became our Prime Minister and this Labour government entered office, the numbers coming across on small boats have risen by 31%. In the last week alone, 4,000 people have entered our country illegally on small boats. The situation is out of control.
According to Keir Starmer, the present level of illegal migration fuels global insecurity.
This is the two-tier justice system. This is why they call Keir Starmer two-tier Keir. And I'll tell you something, guys, but the other point...
Even Keir Starmer recognises
how bad
what
this
a
is.
catastrophe
Let's have a listen.
this is.
Has him freely acknowledging that it makes people angry. Critics counter that under Starmer, the UK's domestic crises, from an overloaded asylum system to an unresolved workforce shortage, have not improved much. These detractors view his aggressive language on organised immigration crime, as usual, tough talk that hardly ever results in significant legislative reforms.
Oh, I don't know, if only there was a Prime Minister who cared about the issue could do something. You're the Prime Minister, Keir. I mean, he's acting like he's just some dude off the street who's a little bit aggrieved.
Yes, it's ridiculous. But James, the reality is what they have literally done.
When are you going to stop the boats, Prime Minister? A reporter asks even before Starmer begins his main speech. The directness of the question brings one right to the centre of the difficulty. Boat crossings remain at record high rates. Public frustration mounts. Still, Starmer responds slowly and turns to the platform to give premeditated remarks. This contrast highlights a recurring element of his leadership. The Prime Minister regularly makes set-piece speeches full of slogans, but she avoids direct, sharp inquiries.
When are you going to stop the boats, Prime Minister? Channel crossings are rising. Are you doing enough to tackle illegal migration?
People start to wonder when Starmer declines to respond right away. Critics see it as a pattern. He turns to rhetorical set pieces instead of directly addressing issues. The Prime Minister's later comments seem more meant to overwhelm that reporter's question than to react directly. After all, channel crossings are rising is a real fact, one that contrasts sharply with Starmer's assertions of improvement.
Before I was a politician, I was the Director of Public Prosecutions in England and Wales. And we worked across borders throughout Europe and beyond Europe to foil numerous plots.
Starmer makes references to his background as Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP, moments into his address. He compares combating human smuggling groups with punishing terror plans, like foiling plane attacks. We should treat people smuggling as a global security threat similar to terrorism, he says. The comparison might, at first look, highlight the seriousness of the situation. Critics point out, nevertheless, that the Prime Minister is mixing separate terror schemes with a more diffuse, international issue with criminal and humanitarian character.
They smash the gangs. He's been saying that for months, and they don't appear to have smashed the gangs. 30,000 arrivals since Labour came to power in July.
30,000.
The graph is going the wrong way. If you look at how it's tracking for this year, it's on course to be a record year. Compared where we were compared to last year and the previous years, it's going up very, very quickly. Yes, of course, the weather has a factor to play in it. When it's sunny and it's calm, it's easier to cross in the boats.
This is a rhetorical jump, some viewers say. Stopping the murderous scheme of one group is not at all like untangling the intricate networks guiding immigrants from Africa or the Middle East to Europe. Critics of Starmer contend that although large declarations about treating smugglers like terrorists sound severe, they hide the complexity of the core reasons for migration, from conflict to poverty to climate change. He is basically laying on bravado rather than using a sophisticated strategy.
We are recruiting hundreds of specialist investigators from across our police, our border force and intelligence services, creating an elite border force, working with our international partners, ending the fragmentation.
Starmer tries to separate himself from the former Tory Rwanda scheme, or the gimmicks he says dominated the past. Still, the methods he proposes, stricter border security, more thorough intelligence sharing, and additional authority to grab migrant phones, mirror past attempts at severe deterrence that usually only had a temporary impact. Viewers remember that every government that follows 2010 has started further crackdowns, each justified by moral high ground claims.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, it's a sort of smoke and mirrors exercise. They want to shift the focus onto the international arena, but most of the problems are domestic. They're rooted in our legal system. The reason why this crisis is taking place is because we do not have the legal tools to detain people for a very short period of time and then deport them.
He throws out the number 24,000 people returned, implying a victory. Meanwhile, journalists speculate about the proportion of genuinely new or expedited removals, as well as the number of cases handled using pre-Starmer systems prior to her appointment. Without explanation, it seems more of a rhetorical flourish than tangible evidence of a crackdown. Then, unfortunately, Starmer pushes zero-hour contracts and predatory companies into the same speech, therefore distorting the story with domestic labour market concerns. Critics point to it as an attempt to blame immigrants for low wages, a strategy many find incompatible with Starmer's earlier focus on progressive values.
My message to people smugglers is this: we're breaking your business model and leaving you nowhere to hide.
Starmer addresses people smugglers straight in a little film clip.
When I was this country's chief prosecutor, I locked up terrorists who plotted to blow up planes across the Atlantic.
He promises to keep increasing those numbers and boasts of returning over 20,000 people who have no right to be here. This comment echoes the major points from his summit speech. Nevertheless, the actual daily arrival figures show little indication of slowing down, which fuels rumours that the Prime Minister is just rebranding regular Home Office activities. Then he waves his DPP record.
And whilst, of course, most companies do the responsible thing and carry out right-to-work checks, too many dodgy firms have been exploiting a loophole to skip this process, hiring illegal workers, undercutting honest businesses, driving down the wages of ordinary working people. And all of this, of course.
Reusing these terror themes for border security, according to his detractors, is not subtle. They also point out that such aggressive language could overwhelm the real humanitarian concerns about refugees. Many policy analysts, in the meantime, argue Starmer's approach provides no clear departure from past enforcement-heavy policies. While the rhetorical bombast fuels headlines, it leaves basic problems unresolved, such as secure legal paths or the asylum backlog. Starmer's speech is notable for its frequent denunciation of gimmicks, likely in reference to the Conservative Rwanda scheme, or pushback operations. Still, Starmer's own policy specifics sometimes seem flimsy. He speaks of a recently established Border Security Command and no fragmentation, but these rebrands resemble past attempts at centralised coordination that failed due to inadequate budgets or clear missions.
And whilst, of course, most companies do the responsible thing and carry out right-to-work checks, too many dodgy firms have been exploiting a loophole to skip this process, hiring illegal workers, undercutting honest businesses, driving down the wages of ordinary working people. And all of this, of course, we're also working upstream to address factors that drive people towards small boats in the first place. Working with the authorities in Albania and Vietnam on campaigns to deter those who are thinking about making that perilous journey.
"We must smash the gangs," is a common Starmer mantra, as if repeating it will conjure the required capacity. Political watchers remember the Prime Minister employing equally strong language for other concerns, such as housing or NHS reforms, only to find poor follow-through. One wonders, is this yet another audacious but meaningless slogan? Starmer does sporadically refer to deeper upstream causes of people's perilous travels, especially in reference to cooperation with Albania and Vietnam to discourage migration. He does not, however, go to great length on how to address the fundamental problems of poverty, strife, or natural calamities. Critics question if the Prime Minister's strategy would depend too much on policing, at the price of tackling the motivation underlying migration.
When are you going to stop the boats, Prime Minister? Channel crossings are rising. Are you doing enough to tackle illegal migration?
Practically, what does working upstream mean? If a partnership with foreign governments focuses on enhanced economic opportunities or safe legal paths, it can help. But Starmer usually speaks about deterrence campaigns, thereby perhaps excluding the desperation that drives these travellers. Humanitarian groups point out in the meantime that the Prime Minister's emphasis on closing cracks between institutions just serves to direct refugees into more dangerous paths. Starmer tries to present himself throughout both transcripts as the firm-handed head who will unite agencies, coordinate internationally, and stop exploitation. But the Prime Minister's record calls into doubt these assertions. Record daily arrivals persist. Experts caution that deterrence alone rarely suffices. Internal Home Office morale remains low, with staff turnover and resource shortages continuing to hamper effective enforcement. Humanitarian concerns linger, as Starmer's approach shows limited nuance on asylum appeals, vulnerability screenings, or safe passage frameworks. What shows up is Starmer once more garnering rhetorical headlines. "We're crushing your business model, consider them as terrorists," without revealing a logical policy architecture. Though one of dubious, long-lasting influence, the summit at Lancaster House is a fantastic show. Starmer keeps trying to mix calls for ramped-up enforcement powers with progressive language. There's nothing compassionate about ignoring these vulnerabilities. The strain lets him be vulnerable to attack from several angles. On the left, he seems uncaring towards actual asylum seekers, hence perpetuating the deport-first strategy. Many on the right view him as all rhetoric, still unable to provide the dramatic deterrent needed. Starmer purports to advocate for fairness for working people, but in one section, he juxtaposes the undercutting of British wages by working-age people from overseas. He does not, however, address the labour shortfall in sectors including social care, hotels, or agriculture. Viewers see this as evidence he is pandering to complaints without explaining how the UK may fill vital tasks should avenues for legal migration be severely limited.
Because there's also nothing progressive about allowing working-age people to come here illegally, instead of supporting them to build their own economies, secure a better future for their own countries, and build a safer, more prosperous world.
Some people find this comment too oversimplified. If people come from areas devastated by war, survival is more important than building their own economy. Starmer's comments can sound tone-deaf, neglecting how often crises drive individuals to run. Starmer answered questions regarding actual development during the Q&A section of the summit. Rather than providing fresh statistics or acknowledging complexity, he focused on known lines, such as praising cross-border stings said to have seized dozens of boats and engines. Still, annual crossing figures are shockingly high, and some argue Starmer should admit that smugglers change fast. This discrepancy fuels mistrust. Are these seizures and arrests more symbolic than transformative?
That was a joint operation by our National Crime Agency, together with Dutch and Belgian police.
While such arrests are important, the Prime Minister's denial of acknowledging that networks evolve daily erodes faith. The transaction will keep changing if basic push and pull elements remain unresolved. In fact, dozens of boats is a tiny fraction of the hundreds used each month. Ultimately, the Lancaster House event and Starmer's taped message to smugglers perfectly capture a Prime Minister mostly dependent on spectacle. Even if he says he has synergy with other countries, no major policy change results, just increases of current enforcement. He opposes evil trade, but none of the announcements particularly address how safe legal channels can lower demand for illegal travel. Nor does he suggest a major overhaul of the UK's asylum backlog, well known for delaying rulings on legitimate claims. Furthermore, even if some may find Starmer's criticism of the Rwanda scheme appealing, the overall approach of increasing deportations, establishing new border command, and using law enforcement is reminiscent of past government initiatives. Critics argue that if the Prime Minister really thought of a new approach, we would see more extensive legislative changes or widening of legal avenues. Rather, we notice hints of the same cyclical pattern: strong speech, little outcomes, press discontent, and ongoing boat arrivals. This situation has the potential to define Starmer's legacy on immigration. He inherited a citizenry that was disgruntled, growing xenophobia inspired by dramatic headlines, and a tired civil service. He is clamping down on police powers and brand new command structures instead of turning to a bold but balanced policy, one combining actual enforcement with humanitarian sense. As all of this is happening, local governments object over inadequate finances, detainees flood temporary housing, and smuggling networks change course rapidly. Is a microcosm of Starmer's approach, a brief, sharp message declaring, we're smashing your business model, locked down terrorists. I now pursue offenders who put passengers in small boats. For a short news cycle, it could generate cheers, but the more fundamental problems continue to occur. Viewers often wonder, beyond platitudes, where is the Prime Minister's thorough plan for the direction of Britain's immigration policy? Many come away from examining Starmer's remarks and the underlying facts by realising that this is a Prime Minister out of his reach. The issues, fragile cross-border collaboration, growing smuggling networks, and an untenable asylum system, demand more than just a rebranding agency or another verbal attack on criminals. Daily events in the Channel still eclipse Starmer's references to police or intelligence stings and an electorate eager for practical answers. Overall, it is insufficient to sound tough. Starmer will suffer the same criticism as his predecessors if his promised Border Security Command fails to stop arrivals or lacks the means to completely destroy criminal networks. Much rhetoric, little effect. While the status quo remains the same, the voters grow worn out and suspicious of each new Prime Leader rebranding a few agencies and then announcing triumph from the same forceful speech. Drawn from these transcripts, Keir Starmer's latest speeches show a leadership style strong on dramatic phrases: smash the gangs, treat them like terrorists, no shortcuts, no gimmicks, but without a novel approach. Drawing on his DPP history to demonstrate personal toughness, he links illegal migration to global security. Still, the structural flaws go unresolved, and tiny boat landings continue. Critics who see salaries and living conditions weakened by more general economic mismanagement find his frequent emphasis on "this is about fairness for working people" insincere. The little message to people smugglers provides a soundbite but not the deeper cure in the meantime. One wonders, then, whether the Prime Minister seeks more to calm home critics than to actually disturb international networks. This moment presents a crucial test. Will Starmer's rhetorical border security revolution yield results that previous governments have failed to achieve, or will it merely contribute to Britain's ongoing struggle with channel crossings and asylum gridlock? Skeptics tend towards the latter, since the Prime Minister's statements reveal a basic lack of fresh ideas and a basic nervousness. Though he may promise to unite intelligence and police, the traffickers will adjust and the so-called evil trade will continue if the fundamental asylum laws remain broken. Claiming to be the largest worldwide conference on illegal migration, Keir Starmer talks of ushering in a new era of cooperation. He advocates a crackdown reminiscent of anti-terrorism operations, a new Border Security Command, more return flights, and the legendary no-nonsense style he formerly used as DPP. But overshadowing all is a sense that these are essentially rhetorical retreads, skirting deeper complexity, neglecting safe path expansions, and failing to unite a fragmented home bureaucracy. Boat arrivals remain high as the dust settles. Critics on the left and right lament either cruelty to migrants or inadequate border security. Local residents see little change in the everyday reality of refugee hotels and stretched services. This situation exposes a harsher reality for a Prime Minister who takes immense satisfaction in his grown-up style and calm hand. Though loud, Starmer's border security speech lacks actual thorough strategy behind it. Thus, his promise to smash the gangs might likely stay empty. Ultimately, the public's query, "When are you really going to stop the boats, Prime Minister?" still begs a compelling response.